Okay, let me do it. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the second day of the first Journal of Population Economics online meeting in 2024. We are in the second day, and I'm happy to welcome Kompal Sinha as the editor in charge of this session. Just a few seconds of introduction. The function of the meeting is not transparent to everybody, but we would like to attract attention to what we publish. We value submissions not only before, but also after publications. This should help us to get more attention worldwide for the paper and for the journal. There's a video which will be online after this event and can be referred to on the GLO website. One mention in the program on the website, you also have links, not only when the paper is open access, you can, the searcher can find the full manuscript, but also there is something I call read link. The publisher allows to use a link where you can read online any paper. And you can distribute this link to anybody you want to distribute it to in the social media and in person. That's part of the strategy this publisher has. Okay, now we have not so much time. That's why I'm handing over now to Kompal, who has full control over the rest of the morning. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Klaus, and thank you so much to everyone for being here. I'm Kompal Sinha. I'm Associate Professor of Economics at Macquarie University, Sydney. And I also serve as the editor for Journal of Population Economics, as Klaus just said. Welcome to today's session. This session is going to be in two parts. So we'll have a session on migration, starting off straight after I stop speaking. And then we'll have another one, which is historical demography. As Klaus said, all the papers are on the website. I've put the link in the chat box for your ease of access. Please go and browse and share as you need. The way we want to run this session is 15 minutes for each paper, which means 10 minutes of presentation time and 5 minutes of a little bit of a discussion after that. What I want to do is I want to start with a timer, which will go against my screen, and that will be for 10 minutes, and then you can stop and we can have the question session. If along the way you feel that there are questions that you need to ask, it's best put in the chat box. We can talk about them later on, or keep all your questions towards the end of the session. Could I also request people to mute their mics as the speaker starts to speak so that there's no disturbance, and we can then unmute and ask questions later on. So I'd like to welcome Yanren Zhang, who will talk about labor contract law and the inventor mobility, evidence from China. Yanren, thanks a lot. And here I have the start of the timer. You should be able to see it next to my screen. And over to you, please.
Okay. A big thanks to the Journal of Population Economics for accepting our paper and give us this platform to share our latest findings. I will give you a quick rundown of why we did this research, how we went about it, and what we discover. As we know, spreading new ideas is key to economic growth. Employees who are very good at coming up with new ideas, who we call inventors, are super important in the process as they move from one firm to another. Most researchers have looked at how this movement affects the business and the wider society. But recently, people have started to be interested in what makes inventors move in the first place. This is something that's not just interesting to economists, but also to business managers and those who make policies. Many studies have looked at how firms can stop their rivals from poaching their inventors using something called non-compete agreements. This helps make sure that firms don't lose out when inventors decide to switch jobs. But it's worth remembering that successful R&D doesn't just depend on how much a firm invests. It also depends on the inventors themselves. and how much they invest in their own skills. That's why laws have been put in place all over the world to protect the right of inventors as workers. In this paper, we are looking at how these labor contract laws that protect workers' rights might affect the movement of inventors between firms. In theory, these laws could reduce how much inventors move between firms in two ways. Firstly, the labor contract law make it harder for firms to unfairly fine inventors because they have to have formal contracts with their workers. Secondly, because protecting workers make labor a more expensive input compared to physical capital, firms might invest more in real terms, leading to a high demand for inventors. Based on this, we think that protecting workers' rights will reduce inventor mobility. To test this idea, we looked at when Chinese labor contract law was brought in 2008 as a kind of quiz natural experiment. Since China started opening up and reform policy in 1978, it has moved from a planned economy to a market. Sorry. It has moved from a planned economy to a market economy. As this reform has continued, the central government has given firms the flexibility to decide their own labor policies based on their business needs. At the same time, individuals have been allowed to choose their own jobs. However, the hukou system has largely stopped the migrant workers from being able to sign labor contracts with firms and get legal protections. Since the 1990s, they have started to fight for their rights more and more through protests. In response to these protests, which cause threat social stability, China brought in the labor contract law, which started on January 1st, 2008. The law strengthened the basic right of work by requiring firms to provide formal written contract for workers. As Chinese firms have very little influence over the lawmakers, we can see the introduction of the labor contract law as an exogenous event. Another important point is that compared to private firms, Chinese state-owned enterprises, because they are fully managed by the government, are more likely to strictly follow the law to best carry out the government intentions. There are differences between state-owned enterprises and non-state-owned enterprises in how they implement the labor contract law. So we use this difference to estimate the impact of the labor contract law on how much move around. We compare the differences in the chance of inventor living between the treatment, that is the state-owned enterprise, and the control, that is private firms. Before and after the labor contract law was brought in 2008. Specifically, we set up a DID regression as follows. The dependent variable mobility stands for how much inventors move around. The main explanatory variable is the interaction term. We added 6 firm characteristics into the regression, including size, age, return on assets, market book ratio, sales growth, and leverage. We use the inventor, industry, and the US specific fixed effect to account for unobservable facts that determine inventor mobilities. We use pattern data from the state Intellectual Property Office of China, and firm data from Chinese manufacturing firms listed between 2004 and 2012. See the patent data records both the inventors and the firm they work for. If the data shows that an inventor has moved to a different firm, we consider that this inventor has moved. This graph shows the change of inventor moving in state enterprises and non-state enterprises from 2004 and 2012. We can see that before 2008, the rate of inventor moving in all firms was going up. But after 2008, the rate in all firms went down. But the drop in SOEs was bigger. After 2009, this drop stops, but the difference in the rate stayed the same. This figures shows the change in the difference in the rate of inventor mobility between the two types of firms. Before 2008, there was no big difference between state enterprises and the non-enterprises. But after 2008, a big difference appeared between these two types of firms. Our baseline results show that the introduction of labor contract law reduced the chance of inventor moving between firms by 7.8%. This finding stands up to a number of robust checks, including exclude other shocks around 2008. We also use alternative subsamples, adding more control variables and adjusting standard errors and conduct a placebo test. In addition, we'll also find that the introduction of the labor contract law led to an increase in firms' innovation quality, R&D expenses, and the proportion of inventors. This could be due to two possible reasons. One, better protection of labor rights might make inventors more willing to put more effort into R&D. Two, firms might have more reasons to replace low-skilled workers with high-skilled ones. We also conduct heterogeneity analysis. We found that firms in labor-intensive industries were more affected by the labor contract law. The same was true for firms that relied more on technological innovation and firms with a high rate of inventor mobility before the law was introduced. Lastly, for inventors working outside the core of R&D networks, the labor contract law had a stronger effect. Okay. Finally, let me briefly summarize our research. Many studies have looked at how protecting employment affect firms' innovation. Most of study focused on the increased cost of adjust labor, but don't pay much attention to how it affects the movement of inventors. In this study, we explore whether and how labor protection influenced how much inventors move around, and find that labor contract law play an active role in reducing inventor mobility. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Yanren, for the excellent presentation. Questions, please.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was wondering what is the the expectation of the Chinese government, do they want more mobility or less mobility? And what should be, what is the good way of attaining growth?
According to our theory, stability is much better because China government prefer a fixed relationship between firm and the inventor. In this case, they can invest more in firm-specific capital or human capital, which will improve the performance of corporation innovation.
It's like the idea of keeping a good human capital, so to speak, similar to if you keep an inventor that enables, at least for the company, to be maybe more successful than otherwise. Yes. However, in general, we believe that mobility is better normally because, well, there are so many frictions and challenges. The more people are willing to move to the better places, the better for the economy in total. So it might be the company might win, but maybe not society. That's maybe it's a similar issue as Claire was asking.
Yes, the big concern of the firm is if the mobility rate is very high, if the inventors have a good idea, they will move to another firm for a bad price. But so forcing such moral-headed behavior, the firm has no incentive to invest more in R&D. And this is the same for the workers. For the inventors need to invest some firm-specific human capital to get more innovation. But if the firm take the patent and refuse to pay the price, they can justify the inventor. Forcing this, the inventor has less incentive to exert high effort to R&D behavior. Right? So according to our recent study, we believe a stable relationship between the firm and the inventor will be a big advantage for corporate innovation. This is a two-sided mono-hazard problem. Look like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Xuechao, your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a follow-up kind of comment, which is related to previous comments. Like, I'm curious in the future, can we look at the quality of those kind of patterns? Because I think sometimes this kind of mobility, meaning the competition or, free, in and out of these firms, then probably it's a way to encourage those, innovators to try to increase the quality of the patents. While if we have a very stable relationship with the firm, maybe they don't have the incentive to, compete for the quality of the patent. But just one hypothesis, and I'm curious if the data can support your maybe another future study. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, I agree. This is a good idea. It looks like a professor work for normal university, but if he published some good paper on top journal, he will move to much better university. So in this case, yes, and job mobility will improve the quality of innovation. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful discussion. We need to move to the next paper now for further questions about this paper, please put in the chat box, and the author can get back to you separately. Could I request you to take off your slides, and could I request Claire to please start sharing your slides? So the next talk we have here is Smuggling of Forced Migrants to Europe, a Matching Model. And the presenter is here with us, Claire Naiditch. Claire, over to you, please. And I have 10 minutes starting to roll for you now.
All right, thank you. So I'm very happy to be here and to present this paper that has been accepted to the Journal of Population Economics. So it's entitled Smuggling of Forced Migrants to Europe, a Matching Model, and it's joint work with Olivier, Charlot, and Radu, Vranceanu. So here is the context of the study. As you are probably aware, in Europe, there have been a surge in irregular migration, and especially in illegal border crossing at the external borders of the EU. So here you can see data from Frontex recording illegal border crossings. And as you can see, many people are coming through sea, so mostly crossing the Mediterranean Sea, and many people are also coming by land. And this paper will focus more or less on people crossing by the sea. So as you can see, there has been a huge increase in 2015, what we called the refugee crisis in Europe. And then it decreased, and it's slowly increasing again since after the COVID period. People that are crossing borders are usually doing that with smugglers. So a market of smugglers developed with the development of irregular migration. So more than 90% of the people who cross the borders irregularly said that they did it with the help of the smugglers. So what do smugglers do? They help people for the whole journey, so from transportation and accommodation to the production and selling of fraudulent documents. So there are many ways of crossing the borders. And this activity has been shown to be a very high profit and low risk activity. The turnover of the smuggling market has been estimated at a bit less than 200 million in 2019. The smuggling fee varies from $1,000 US to $5,000 US, depending on where you cross, where you live and where you go to. And in the meanwhile, only 9,000 smugglers have been detected in 2020. And so in this context, immigration has becoming a main concern for EU citizens. And in the Eurobarometer of 2021, immigration was in the second position of things that the Europeans took care of and wanted a solution to. So that's why we are going to look at, so because of this, the EU aims at controlling and curbing irregular migration and especially fighting against smugglers. So what we want to do is to see what is the impact of these policies of the numbers of irregular migrants and smugglers, and what is the impact of these policies as well on the migrants' welfare. So to do that, we're going to design a theoretical model. So it's a matching model of the smuggling market, which is adapted to the European case. And we do simulations to better analyze what's going on. Okay, what do we know? We know from the literature that studied forced migration, we know many things, but nothing has been done on the way people cross the borders. And the fact that they will try and try and try again, even if they did not succeed from the first time. Then there's a literature on human smuggling that looks more at the point of view of the smuggled people and not at the smugglers. And finally, there have been matching models, but mostly on the host countries and not on the smuggling market. All right, so we designed a matching model. So it's inspired by the matching labor market by Pissarides. And why did we use this market? That's because we wanted to incorporate two things that are very characteristic of this market. We wanted to incorporate trade frictions, because here, of course, it's a market, it's an illegal market. There's a lot of asymmetric information, low trust, so many frictions between potential migrants and the smugglers. And we also wanted to incorporate the fact that, as I said, it's a flow market with people trying and trying again, even if they did not succeed the first times. Then, as I said, we adapted it to the European case. What is typical of this market is that some sociologists and anthropologists have shown that the organization of the market is a bit, it's mostly small firms that are competing with each other, okay? And there's this free entry in this market. There's a mix of self-interest and cooperation, and smugglers are not the very bad guys that we hear about. Okay, they are going to negotiate the smuggling fee, and they don't just want to take all the surplus from the migrants. And then, as I said, we are going to look at the fact that people are crossing the sea, and most of them, I mean, they face death, not most of them, but many of them will die during the journey. So what we're going to do is to look at two kinds of European policy measures, the ones that target the migrants and try to discourage them from coming, and the ones that target the smugglers, and to turn this market into a high risk and low profit market instead of a low risk and high profit activity. All right, so briefly, as I said, people are coming from all over the world, mostly from war zones and crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Just what did we find with this model? We found that coercion-based measures are going to work. They're going to deter migration. They're going to deter smugglers, but they're going also to impose a huge cost on migrants' welfare. On the contrary, legal migration policy, so just increasing a bit legal ways of coming into Europe, will decrease the numbers of irregular migrants and smugglers, increase migrants' welfare, and will not increase the total number of migrants to Europe. And finally, we found an interesting result on the asylum policy, showing that because of this, the fact that migrants are going to try and try again to come in, okay, if you have an in-between asylum policy, they're going to have the largest flows of irregular migrants, and it would be better in terms of decreasing the number of migrants to have either an extremely restrictive policy or a quite loose one. I have 2 minutes. So irregular migration is going to happen from a non-origin country to a destination country. And smugglers as well as migrants want to maximize either their utility or their profits. And the destination country wants to minimize the number of irregular migrants and smugglers. So this is in a way how we try to model what's happening. Migrants are searching for an opportunity to leave. They can meet a smuggler, or they can get legal access and directly come to Europe. If they meet a smuggler, then they wait a bit until they can travel. There they might get arrested or they might die during the journey. And then they apply for asylum. Some are going to be accepted and become refugees, and the other ones are rejected. And those that are rejected, they are going to try again to come to Europe. So we solved the model in 3 steps. And I will show you the main results right here. All right, so as I said, if you increase the rate of visas, okay, you're going to increase the migrants' welfare. You're going to decrease the number of irregular migrants, but this decrease will be higher than the increase in legal migrants. So overall, you're not going to have an increase in the migrant population in Europe. And it seems to us that it's the best policy because you will also decrease the number of smugglers and the smuggling fee. Now, if you use the asylum policy, if you decrease the rate of asylum acceptance, which is a bit what Europe is doing these days, you will, of course, decrease the migrants' welfare. But depending on the level you choose, you may increase or decrease the number of irregular migrants. And this will always decrease the number of smugglers. So here's basically what's happening with the asylum policy. If you decrease the number of accepted people, okay, you have like this curve to represent what's happening on the number of migrants. Okay, and finally, the labor policy. Okay, if you increase living conditions in the destination country, you will increase welfare, but you will also increase the number of irregular migrants and smugglers. Okay. Okay, so I think I presented the main results quite clearly. So we used the matching model of the smuggling market, which we adapted to the European case, okay, to see the impact of different European policies tackling the market of smuggling migrants.
Thank you very much, Claire,
Thank
for the
you.
wonderful discussion. Questions to Claire, please.
If there are none, I may just quickly look into one of the issues. But what you have argued that well, there's this myth when people are rejected, they are sent back home. Yes, in practice, this is not the case. I'm speaking from a country where lots of refugees come over. So basically, when they are not accepted, which takes lots of years typically, they either it's difficult to send them back because they have not revealed where they come from, one reason, or the other is because the country of origin are not willing to take them back. And so in practice, only few people are sent back, and it's not only in Germany. So what does this say to your model? I mean, you have excluded.
No, it's this. So this parameter that the asylum that represents the asylum policy. So here we have a strict interpretation. Either you get the refugee status and you stay, or you don't and you go back. Okay, but you could have a more open interpretation and say that you can stay with the refugee status or without, and some are going back either by themselves or they're forced and sent back by planes, which is what happens a bit in France at least. So you can adapt the model easily to say what you're saying. To be more precise, we would have to distinguish then between the refugees that then can access the labor market properly, and the those who stay without the refugee status, and then they would access the illegal labor market. So maybe their utility in the destination country would be a bit lower. So that's why we had this, but we can complete the model and the results would be qualitatively the same.
Okay.
I agree.
Are there any more questions? So I had one quick thought there, not essentially about the model. I'm just thinking, again, I'm in Australia, so you know the asylum over here is a bit of a challenge to come over to Australia. But having said that, how would these policies work alongside each other? The way I'm thinking is the visas are usually skilled migrants that they're allowed. And again, I have Australia in my mind. So a very skilled cohort will come through the visas. So if there's a change in policy for visas, there's going to be an incoming of a lot of skilled people to the country, whereas asylum is the unskilled, the bottom of the pyramid, if you know what I mean, the ones who don't have. So how would these policies come together? I appreciate your model might not be addressing that right now, but yes, that might be something you want to think about maybe, or what were your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so two things. First, among the irregular migrants that are coming and the refugees that are coming to Europe, there are many people with skills. So especially if you take the Syrian case, okay, many Syrian people had diplomas and were very high qualified. So they could get this kind of visa if there was an extension. And also here, the second thing is that what we had in mind were visa, especially for refugees. Okay, it exists. There are very few. You have to go through the UN HTR organization, but they exist. So you just have to expand them and allow people to leave their origin country with these visas instead of going through all the smuggling process. That's what we had in mind.
No more questions? Okay, thank you so much, Claire. What I might request you to do is take off your slides, and may I request Federico to please put up their slide.
Yeah, now we move from China to Europe to South America. Okay.
To South America, yeah. Can you see my slides, right?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much. And the topic for this talk is the impact of policy violence on migration, evidence from Venezuela. So very nice policy papers come together in this session. Thank you so much for the organization. So Federico, as I've said before, I'm going to have a 10-minute timer run for you. And at the end of 10 minutes, I'll start another 1-minute one, but that will be just to kind of keep you. Anyhow, thank you so much. And over to you now.
Thank you so much. And thanks to the editorial board of Journal of Population Economics for organizing this nice meeting. So I'm Federico Maggio. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Bologna, and I'm going to present this paper just published a few days ago on Journal of Population Economics, which is co-authored with Carlo Caporali, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Gran Sasso Science Institute in Italy. So broadly, the aim of this paper is to shed light on the non-economic factors that influence the migrants' decision to leave their home country, specifically focusing on the state violence and how this effect varies depending on the individual characteristics of the potential migrants. And so the perfect context to address our research question is provided by the Venezuelan exodus, which was prompted by the economic and political crisis occurred in Venezuela between 2015 and 2021. And this migration episode is the perfect context because involved almost 1/5 of the Venezuelan population, resulting in a very diverse composition of the migration flow in terms of individual characteristics, in terms of destination characteristics of destination countries and migration policies. So along with this surge in migration, some anecdotal and statistical evidence also shows that Venezuela experienced a steep increase in police violence and extrajudicial killings, going from 5,000 homicides in 2015 to 8,000 homicides committed by security forces in 2018. And as suggested also by the figure below, the common violence did not increase so much following the state violence, resulting in a very steep increase of the percentage of homicides committed by security forces. So one of the main factors that may be responsible of this sudden increase of state violence is the militarization process started by President Maduro in 2015 and finalized in 2017 with the militarization of the national police and the creation of the FAES, Fuerzas de Acciones Especiales, which was trained as an army and not as a police forces in order to repress the opponents and to assure country's governability. So Maduro started to use the FAES as a private army. So how do we stand with respect to the literature? Many papers address the impact of Venezuelan migration on the labor market of the destination countries, on the crime level, the political attitude to the migrants of the receiving country, but still we know very little about the determinants of their choice to abandon their country of origin. Should we call it forced migration? Should we call it economic migration, or maybe a mixture of them? And moreover, there is a lack of studies addressing south-to-south migration, because this migration episode is mostly a south-to-south migration. They went to Colombia, to Peru, to Brazil, and part of them also to the United States and to Europe. And And there is also a lack of studies accounting for the role of violence in the international migration decision-making process. Most of the papers address the role of violence in the displacement of migrants within the country. And so with our study, we try to unveil the causal effect of authoritative violence on the individual likelihood to migrate. We focus on, as I said, on a unique context, which is the one of the Venezuelan exodus during an unprecedented surge in the state violence and in migration. And we employed quite unique disaggregated data on civilian casualties caused by security forces, along with new individual level data representative of the Venezuelan population and in the country of origin and in the destination countries. So we use 3 different sources of data. First of all, we use the ENCOVI 2018, which is a survey representative of the Venezuelan population. And this survey provides us with information about the individual characteristics of the Venezuelans still living in Venezuela, so the left behind, and the characteristics of the Venezuelans residing in the destination countries. We know the migration status, so the place of origin, destination, and date of living, and all the individual characteristics of the Venezuelan migrants. We also use the Observatorio Venezolano de Violencia regarding violence data. We use data on homicides split into committed by security forces and committed by civilians. And given that the Encuesta Nacional de Condiciones de Vida, the ENCOVI 2018, didn't give us the opportunity, the possibility to account for households entirely migrated, we also use this further survey in order to account for the households entirely migrated. Given that we couldn't obtain data on several years for state violence, our empirical strategy exploited the cross-sectional variation of the state violence. And in particular, we estimate the effect of authoritative violence on migration using this model. So the dependent variable is a dummy variable which takes value 1 if the individual migrated between 2017 and 2018. And our variable of interest is the percentage of homicide committed by security forces, while we control for the total level of homicide. I'm going to show you the results of this specification, but in the paper you can also find the specification in which we put the logarithm of homicide committed by security forces plus the homicides committed by civilians. Then we control for some individual characteristics, for some household characteristics, and we also include a vector, including a full set of rules. Of course, the OLS likely yield biased estimates if an observed factor influence at the same time migration and state violence. So we deal with this potential omitted variable bias by performing the sensitivity analysis proposed by Oster. We check the change of R² while adding new controls, and our results are robust to this sensitivity proposed by Oster. But we also use an IV identification strategy in which we use the travel time from the capital to the capital city, to each state's most populated city, for the authoritative violence. And of the first stage, you can find also the table of the first stage is quite robust, and we perform some robustness check in order to deal with the exclusion restriction. I just wanted to give you some insights about the intuition behind the instrumental variable, which is related to 2 strands of literature. The first one is the literature on the logistics of violence, which states that the physical distance is among the most significant drivers of cost of violence. So farther away from the capital is much more expensive to exert violence. And the second strand of literature is related to the political economy, which states that the rebellions are more effective when they take place closer to the capital itself. And so the state, the central government, has the as an higher incentive to violently control the political discontent closer to the capital, to the political seat of the country. So finally, I show you the main results, the estimated effect of authoritative violence on the individual probability to migrate. We have different specification in which we drop, for example, the migrants who went outside Latin American countries, and we also drop the capital district observations. And the results point to a positive and significant effect across all specifications. As we can see, the coefficient regarding the homicide committed by security forces is always positive and significant, even when we add the sample on the households entirely migrated outside the country. And in line with the literature on economics of migration, also education, age, and female play a key role in the migration decision of migrants. Here, just wanted to show you some interesting heterogeneous effect of authoritative violence on migration. And as we can see, the authoritative violence plays a key role for male and low-educated people. For female, for example, the level of education plays a much more relevant role in the migration decision. For high school and college graduated, the coefficient is still positive, but not significant, suggesting that much more factors could coexist in the migration decision to leave the country. For example, migration policies at destination countries, the labor market situation in the destination countries. So to wrap up, to sum up, to conclude with this paper, we find that the high level of homicides committed by security forces leads to higher level of international migration. And this effect is heterogeneous across gender and education. And these findings have several implications at policy and at literature level. First, they highlight the failure of the militarization policies implemented by President Maduro, which inducing young males to flee the country will make the process of reconstruction of the country after the crisis even harder. And furthermore, the heterogeneous results suggest that violence in the origin country could affect the migrants' skill composition, suggesting that when studying migrants' self-selection, researchers should consider the differences within the country. So I'm done. Thank you so much. Happy to answer to your question, and please contact me if you have any further question, or contact my co-author. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Federico. Thank you. Questions, please.
I have a good question about how to interpret this kind of heterogeneity effects, because we didn't see or actually see now results on those more educated or kind of more privileged people. So is it because these people actually there's a kind of selection there, those people are living in those areas that actually locally actually less exposed to those police violence or police homicide issue. So the treatment actually was not really targeting them, but more in those communities where we observe more low income or less educated population.
This is a nice question, because we think that there should be studied more, but the intuition behind these heterogeneous results is that they are more affected. Actually, they are more targeted by the state violence. But we are not sure whether there is a different perception, for example, of violence. So maybe low-educated people or the poorest part of the country maybe might have higher perception of violence. because they could not defend themselves by the state violence. There might be some mechanisms behind these heterogeneous results. The heterogeneity of the migration flow suggests that it's not because some of them are leaving the country. So we have, for example, 24% of the migrants less than high school diploma, 44% have high school diploma, and 32% are college graduated. So we are not talking, we are talking about a very deep, very diverse migration flow. So this is what I was telling you at the beginning of the presentation. We have this very diverse migration flow that give us the perfect context to address this. Yeah, I hope I answered to your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So are there any more questions? Cynthia, please.
Yeah, I actually had the same question, and I just had a quick follow-up. Is it possible that the higher educated saw this coming and left earlier? Is it possible? You're doing a cross-section, right? You only have 1 year of data. I don't know if you could do it or if this was anticipated, but kind of thought the same thing. Or different types of violence, because your authoritative violence measure it's a proxy.
Yeah, yeah, but actually, I don't have it here, but in the paper we because the Incovi data set give us the date of leaving of the migrants, and we have this information for 5 years before 2018. So we actually we check for this change of the migration flow, so the skill composition of migrants in the years before, and actually it didn't change so much over time. Yes, of course, at the very beginning of the crisis, much more skilled migrants left the country. But starting from 2014, the skill composition of migrants didn't change so much. So we are quite confident that we are capturing a real heterogeneous effect of the state violence. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We kind of eaten up most of our break over here, but it might be worthwhile to just have 5 minutes of a break if that's okay with everyone. So maybe you can assemble at 10:01 local time and give you 5 minutes off now. Thank you so much for all the people speaking for this session. We'll assemble again in 5 minutes. Thank you. Off here, it's 8 p.m. Right, so welcome back, everyone, for this second part of today's session, which was on migration and the historical demography. So now we have 2 papers, both of them talking about the historical demography. As I said before, it's 10 minutes presentation time and 5 minutes discussion time. We'll start off with Xuechao, who will talk about her paper on revolutionized life, long-term effects of childhood exposure to persecution on human capital and marital sorting. Sorry. And I hand over to you and start my timer for 10 minutes. As I said before, it's going to be 10 minutes and then 1 minute extra, and just in case. You will see the clock going now. Over to you.
So maybe I should.
We see your
Yes,
presentation. We see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Let me give it to full screen mode. Is it good to be okay, thank you so much. Yeah, very happy to be here. So this is actually like the first chapter of my PhD dissertation. So I'm very honored to having this chance to be accepted by Journal of Population Economics, and I will share a bit of it today. This paper is about long-term effects of early life exposure to some adverse effects, so which is the persecution context here on human capital and marital sorting outcomes. So I think historically people have documented the socioeconomic consequences of those very intense civil conflicts like wars or genocide. In the meantime, there's some another kind of mistreatment of people that were also kind of systematic, but sometimes went through more covert forms, are those, we call those persecution, and usually it's kind of based on specific identity of individuals like religion, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic classes, or political affiliation. So therefore, in this paper, I would like to kind of try to add a bit of the evidence about this part. And because most of the time, we might see people survive through those kind of mistreatment, but what kind of effects they have to endure in the future, and especially for children, what kind of effects when they have exposure when they're very young could be very meaningful in terms of the policy implication to compensate those people who actually survived through those period of history. So therefore, in this paper, I try to answer what are the long-term consequences of the early life exposure to persecution. And here I'm utilize what we call the class struggle period in China, which has happened in the middle of last century. And under this kind of class struggle ideology, people from certain socioeconomic classes were particularly targeted in order to reach a very, very kind of progressive equality in the society. And this kind of setting happened also in other communist kind of regimes in the a similar historical period. So in this paper, I would like to focus on those long-term outcomes on human capital formation, but then also look at some social impacts, which is beyond the boundary of social classes as the marital sorting outcomes. And also, I would like to compare the effects between different early life stages to see which period could matter most possibly. So basically, in relative to the existing literature, which is different from looking at some consequences of local casualties or some physical kind of damages, I'm focusing on a specific group of people that were targeted by those mistreatment. And because the setting comes from China, I am looking at the kind of the overall class struggle period consistent with recent study, looking at those not just class struggle, but also like those land reforms happening in the rural areas right after the regime was established. And also, I think in this paper, different from paper looking at maybe those more schooling age exposure, I would like to highlight the significance of those very early ages during the childhood. So how I would identify this kind of effects, basically starting from this historical context, which is around 25 years from 1950 to the end of the Cultural Revolution. And after that, China opened the country and started to do economic reform. But during that kind of period, we can see there were sequential or even overlapped campaigns or movements. Most of the time, they're targeting certain groups of population. And what are those groups? Basically, it can be reflected from this table. So there was a administratively kind of defined family classes. And this was kind of laid down by the central power since 1940. And historically, people kind of usually define or kind of classify those classes into three main groups. And we can see here, I have kind of grouped them into three main columns. And based on which group it is, we can kind of get a sense of what the level of the risk of facing persecution is. So from the least targeted to the most heavily targeted. And in my main study, I do combine the kind of the middle group, the mildly targeted with the heavily targeted as the main treatment group. But in some kind of heterogeneity analysis, I do separate them to see whether there are different level of effects. So this basically is one source of variation coming from the family classes, which is defined by the central power. And then there's another dimension of variation which we can utilize to measure the exposure, which is based on this kind of both birth cohort. For example, if a person was born in 1968, And we can see that because the class struggle period is a fixed period, so for this person, we will know exactly how many years this person got exposure during, for example, early childhood, middle childhood, or adolescence. Therefore, if we kind of combine these two dimensions of variation, we can help to identify for people born in those certain targeted classes with a certain years of exposure, use that to measure this kind of treatment effect. So that's why I will use a basic kind of difference or event study type of identification strategy. So I start with the event study version of strategy. It's going to help us to see or address the concern of pre-trend and also kind of to compare the cohorts by cohorts. So here we will interact this kind of indicator of targeted group with the indicator of years relative, the birth year relative from 1950. And later we can also replace this kind of year indicator with the level exposure, which is basically the length of exposure in each childhood period to measure this kind of treatment effect. And then I can also add in the further kind of control the spouses outcomes, spouses control variables, and then replace the outcome as the spouse's outcome to look at this kind of marital sorting effect. So then the data. So the data comes from the China Family Panel Study, which is a biannual survey. So far, we have 5 years. And the very important information that we can get from the data is that there is a kind of self-reported family class label reported in the baseline year. So based on that, we can use that to define people into different class groups. And also the data set provides a rich set of individual level outcomes, especially those main outcomes like human capital, cognitive skills, and kind of marriage outcomes. So here, this is a kind of more descriptive version of the result or the story. So what I'm showing here is that if we look at the treatment and control group, or we say the targeted, the least targeted, which is the control group, and the main targeted group, we can see that the advantage of those human capital outcomes persists for the cohorts without early life exposure, but then the gap disappeared. However, if we look at the two classes coming from the control group, like the poor farmers versus other least targeted groups, their gaps persist. So it suggests there is something going on there, which actually going to change the outcome or the human capital outcomes of people coming from those targeted classes with early life exposure to this period of class struggle persecution. Then this is basically another version of the kind of basically like using the event study strategy. We can see how does the outcomes change over cohorts, and then compared to the cohorts born kind of or very kind of older than from those kind of class struggle period, we can see people coming from those targeted classes and with early life exposure would experience kind of worse outcomes in terms of education attainment, but also like cognitive skills and income. And then I use another like the variation of the identification strategy to get the kind of point estimates of the relationship between the length of the exposure and those outcomes. And we can see that first overall early life exposure negatively kind of lead to negative or worse human capital outcomes, but the effects is kind of predominantly kind of larger in the very early years. Then we can also add in the spouses controls and look at the association with the spouses outcome. So here it tells us that early life exposure also kind of leads to that a higher probability of marrying kind of lower human capital outcomes. But also even after we control the human capital, we can see that they're marrying people coming from those classes that were protected by the regime, and less likely from the classes that are coming from their own classes or those targeted classes. So which means that something changes their either perception or other type of sorting like the human capital sorting. So I do have some heterogeneous effects. I will skip them, but then just try to suggestively show some possible mechanisms. For example, those kind of early life kind of delayed physiological development, because we do observe some higher probability of being underweight. And I try to see whether education can explaining those marriage outcomes and then we find that it couldn't actually address most of the effects on the spouses classes. So that's why I propose some other mechanisms, for example, their kind of psychological well-beings, or those kind of perceptions in terms of what factor is, most important. And they tend to believe less in personal efforts, more in kind of family background. So that's so far, that's kind of the main finding of the paper. I'm very happy to share more details later in the discussion, or talk about the papers later. But overall, I think there is worse outcomes when people have longer childhood exposure to this kind of adverse exposure of the persecution, and it even can affect their future marriage choices. And I also want to highlight that at least in this setting, the very early years of the childhood do matters most. Sorry, I do take a bit more minutes from the time, so I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions, please. No?
Yeah, I just have
yes, sure. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I have a question. It's more a policy question. I was wondering if, looking at your results, Mao would have been happy, because you're saying that people, they marry, they change the class they marry into. So is that what he intended to do?
I think that's a good question. I mean, maybe we need to ask Mao, but I think here it's at least some evidence of that this kind of social kind of structure, or the distribution of people from different human capital level or different classes has been broke by this kind of political or intervention, and I think it's hard to say the overall welfare change, but at least for people that were treated, at least from those kind of targeted families, there is some kind of implication that they were kind of adversely affected through their life course. So yeah, that's a great question, but it's also a difficult question.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I believe there's no more questions. If there's a question, please pop it in the chat box. Yes, Nikos.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Just a quick question. It was a very nice presentation, but just to clarify how you classify initially the three the groups in three, let's say, in three main boxes, like the least targeted. Is there an official classification by the regime, or it's based on the relevant literature?
Yeah, that's a very great question. So I didn't get very enough time to clarify this. So basically, the list of the classes here are coming from this official codes, which actually was not abolished until some years after in 2000. So it's coming from the official, and in terms of the breakdown of the three groups, it was mainly coming from kind of my observation of the for example, capitalist definitely is the group that is heavily targeted, and then there was some kind of historical evidence of that people coming from the middle classes, sometimes they were targeted, sometimes it's okay. So it could be, it's not kind of the breakdown is not, there's no kind of official kind of rule, but I do check, for example, if I combine them or separate them, whether the results can fit into our anecdotal expectation that the more heavily targeted groups or more kind of affected, or using some kind of self-reported a question about how many events you experienced. It's actually kind of goes into the kind of in a way that from the list to the most heavily targeted groups, the persecution level goes increase with that definition. So it's a kind of yeah, it's kind of how to say, mixed, because there's no official definition of how to break down these three groups, but there were kind of historical description of that. Usually people were kind of classified into three groups.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe these are mutually exclusive groups in some senses, because there is an overlap of farmer being there as well, and in the heavily targeted one as well. So are they mutually exclusive groups? Because these are household level categorization. So is there a possibility for the same household to have different categories in one?
So this is theoretically, this is kind of inherited. So like if the father is a farmer, then their son will be called the son of the farmer or the son of the capitalist, which has some stigma during their life. So theoretically, there is kind of only one kind of label transferred through the blood.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now we move on to the next presentation by Sofia Tsitou. And Sofia is going to talk to us about geography, land ownership, inequality, and literacy, historical evidence from Greek regions. So over to Greece from China now. So over to you, Sofia, once I start my time.
Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, Sofia, put it in whole screen. It's better to put it in whole screen mode.
Yes, I have it on the full screen mode. No.
No, it's showing as so if you just press this on the bottom right.
Bottom right.
Mode, yeah, on your screen.
Mm.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, I can.
But
it's on the top left,
the right.
at least the right and the left.
So usually where it says 70% on the bottom right of your screen, the first icon from that side.
Okay, perfect.
The presentation. Now? Maybe three tabs down. I think you have different language, right? So press on the last one there. The one
the last
exactly.
One, Sofia, the last tab.
Yes, after the one just next to the 70% scale there.
Okay. Yes, it is in the 70%.
Yeah,
No,
but just on the left of this, there is a tab there for full screen. Just on the left of this.
Now you can see full screen.
Well, just there where the cursor is.
Yes, it's on the top left.
So
anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you very much for the organization of this workshop and of course for the publication of our paper in the Journal of Population Economics. I am Sofia Tsitou, a researcher in the Hellenic Open University and in the University of Macedonia. And I am presenting our work with Nikos, Benos, and Stelios Karagiannis. And our work is geography, land ownership, inequality, and literacy with historical evidence from Greek regions. First of all, our motivation. Factors such as human capital formation, geography, institutions, and ethnic fractionalization have led to important changes in the income distribution for the cross-country since the onset of the Industrial Revolution. So geography has been shown to have persistent effects on past and current economic outcomes. A previous large literature emphasizes that climatic and geographic conditions are critical roles for the comparative economic development, such as Galore and Toll in 2009 and Ashraf and Galore in 2013. So we want to search if inequality in land distribution is a mediator through which geography has affected this human capital formation and the transition from an agricultural to an industrial economy, according to the previous researchers. Our aim. So our work wants to shed light on the joint role of human capital and geography during the early stages of the transition from stagnation to growth for Greece in early 20th century. So we use this period because it is an ideal setting to investigate this nexus between geography and literacy, because large topographic disparities are associated with substantial literacy differentials. In Greece, in this period, large properties were dominant in lowland fertile areas, and industrialization is present, but not very important. It is important only in certain areas. So overall, in Greece, the dominant sector is still agriculture. So we use a regional sample, we use provinces, Greek provinces, and we isolate the impact of sweeping educational reforms, which took place in Greece after that period, on literacy rates from the effect of geography through land inequality. So here, in this map, we can see the distribution of the native literacy rates in 1928 for Greece. Our source of data is the census of the Hellenic Statistical Authority. And we can see in this map that the dark blue colors are for the regions with the highest literacy rates for the natives, and the light blue colors are for the regions with the lowest literacy rates.
Sorry, Sofia, your slide has not moved, I believe, to the graph.
Can you see the map?
Yeah.
Yes, now you can see my slide.
You have to click to the next slide.
Okay.
This one is not the map.
Now it is the table 1. We can see table 1.
No.
It's not advancing.
Have a problem.
Now we see table
1. Okay, perfect. I will leave it without full screen. So let's say again for the map, now we can see that the dark blue colors are for the regions with the highest literacy rates, and the light blue colors are for the regions with the lowest literacy rates. Our empirical analysis consists of 3 stages. So here we can see the first stage. In this stage, we examine whether geographic factors are related to literacy. And as we can see from the F statistic, jointly geography is strongly correlated to literacy. So we can see that the effects of geographic variables as a whole on literacy are really significant. In the next stage, we provide evidence on the relationship between land inequality and geography in order to check if land distribution is a potential channel through which geography affects literacy. So we can see that geography is associated with both literacy and land inequality. And of course, we can see this from the table 1, and now in the table 2, we can see that geography also is correlated with land inequality. So we can say that jointly geography is highly correlated to land inequality. So yes, we can say that distribution in land is shown to be a mechanism behind the effect of geography on literacy. And in our third stage, we estimate now a regression model of literacy on land inequality using again the same geographic controls. So the effect of land inequality on literacy is sizable and negative for all inequality measures, and it is significant for the first baseline variable that we use, the dummy variable from historical sources. So we can say that this underlines the importance of land distribution as a mediator in the geography and literacy relationship. So our conclusions overall is that yes, land distribution is the mediator through which geography influences literacy, a result that's predicted by Gibby and Gersman et al. Geography is correlated with land inequality and thus established that land distribution is a channel through which geography influences literacy. In Greece, the dominance of large properties has a sizable detrimental effect on literacy, and we account for a variety of geographic factors and come to this conclusion. And the impact of geography on human capital accumulation is weaker in more industrialized provinces compared to less industrialized ones. So thank you very much for your attention, and your comments are more than welcome.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Questions, please. No? I think I'd take the opportunity to thank all the presenters for this session. We are spot on time for this session. If there are any more questions, please feel free to contact the authors by email. And I would like to thank the authors for submitting their work to Journal of Population Economics. Over to you, Klaus, before we close.
Well, not really. Do I have anything to say? But thank you very much for a very exciting session. And let's be in touch. And maybe you can join us this afternoon or at another event in the future, because we regularly do these workshops. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for
Thank you very much.
for organizing.